All right, so we will be moving on to our second of the three Spotlight scientific symposia that we've started this year to kind of showcase CGC's efforts in engaging with other organizations. So for our next session, we have our ongoing engagement with the IARC. So our speaker would be Dr. Dilani Lokuhetty. She will be presenting it virtually. A brief introduction. So Dr. Dilani Lokuhetty is a professor in pathology and the head of the WHO classification of tumors group at the WHO International Agency of Research on Cancer in France. She is involved in developing national guidelines for reporting thyroid cytology based on Bethesda system and has contributed to guidelines for breast immune prognostic markers. She's also the recipient of many research awards, including the Presidential Award for Scientific Publication. And as the head of the WCT, she will be providing leadership to the upcoming 6th series WHO classification of tumors. So with that, I'd like to welcome Dr. Dilani.
Hello, good morning. I'm Dilani Lokuhetty, the head of WHO classification of tumors at the International Agency for Research on Cancer in Lyon, France. I'm pleased to make this presentation on WHO classification of tumors looking to the future at the invitation of the organizing committee of this conference. Let me thank them first. As a pathologist at the IARC, International Agency for Research on Cancer, which is part of the World Health Organization, I have no conflicting interest to declare, and all opinions expressed are mine. So let me first explain how the WHO classification of tumors came about. It was through a resolution passed at the World Health Assembly in 1957 to develop a taxonomy for cancer based on shared characteristics. So these shared characteristics are mainly the histopathological characteristics, but more recently these have been supplemented by molecular genetic information. So we look at each tumor type from a multidimensional viewpoint, as mentioned here on this slide, and that also includes molecular pathology as well as genetics, and these two also influencing other domains such as pathogenesis, molecular diagnosis, prognosis, and prediction. We at IARC is a small WCT team comprising only about 15 members. However, we have a lot of external collaborators as standing and expert editors as well as authors. About 1,800 authors contributed to the 5th edition books, and of course our subscribers are mainly pathologists comprising about 60,000, but we know that there are others who use the books, such as epidemiologists, clinicians, geneticists, molecular pathologists, etc. And we estimate the number to be about 300,000. So WHO classification of tumors are fondly known as the Blue Books, and in the current 5th edition we have 14 books with 2 new volumes, Pediatric Tumors volume and the Genetic Tumor Syndromes volume. So in each book, the multidimensional aspect for each tumor type is considered, and also we have the books up on our website, which is known as the WCT website. So of the 14 books, all 14 books are up on the website. The last 6 books are up there as beta versions. These 6 books are currently in varying stages of production. 8 books are on print. So the current 5th edition tumor classification is mainly based on histopathology, but where it has been clinically relevant, molecular and genetic data have been considered, and few molecular classifications have been included in the 5th edition, mainly for the CNS. As you can see here, the gliomas now have a molecular classification and ependymomas as well. In addition, for renal tumors, we have a histopathological classification standing alongside a molecularly defined classification for renal cancers, as shown in this slide. So if I may come back to this genetic tumor syndromes volume, which is known as GTS 5, that is the last book that was produced in the 5th edition, and it's a new volume. The idea for this was mooted in 2019 at the European Congress for Pathology in Nice. Later on, discussions were held with the editorial committee, and based on the cellular mechanisms, molecular pathways, syndromes, and genes, a volume has been compiled, and some of the pathways that have been considered are on the right side of this slide. So for most genetic tumor syndromes, there is a nice correlation, but not for all. So it has been feasible to take this approach in the genetic tumor syndromes volume, but we do expect the classification to expand and move forward in future as more evidence of genetic basis continues to evolve. If you want more information about this book, you can go to our website where Genetic Tumor Syndromes, the beta version of the book, is listed right on top. So, in the 5th series and also in the 6th series, what we envisage is a big challenge due to overload of research information. As you know, the blue books are based mainly on research evidence and not on the eminence of the expert editors and the authors who are there in the working groups. So there's so much research evidence out there, and multiple organizations are involved in collating research information across many disciplines of cancer classification. However, in isolation from each other. So we identified this as a problem, and we initiated a very high level of collaboration between all these organizations that collate research evidence under one umbrella headed by the WCT at IARC, known as the International International Collaboration for Classification and Research on Cancer, known as IC3R. It was commenced in 2019. So this is to show you how IC3R operates. On the right side, we have all these specialized disciplines doing cancer research, digital pathology, histopathology, molecular pathology, genetics. So under the IC3R umbrella, this information provided by these collaborators will be compiled, and this scientific evidence will be used for WHO book production or blue book production as indicated on the left side of the slide. At the same time, we at IARC at the WCT have also initiated a project to look at the evidence gap maps currently available in the 5th edition, and we are trying to map the gaps in evidence, and we will provide them to the scientific community and the IC3R to conduct future research. So we have invited actually the Cancer Genomics Consortium to become a member of the IC3R, and we sincerely hope that they will do so. So, after we completed the 5th edition of WCT, we wanted to do a survey to see where we stand, and it was an email survey which was emailed to all editors and authors as well as online users of the website, and responses from over 1,000 people were received. And these are some of the results. So as you can see, the blue books are used by end users right across the globe, but mainly from Asia, North America, and Europe. And as expected, the main discipline of the end users is histopathology, but there are others as well. As you can see, molecular pathology and genetics specialists also use these books in addition to others, as I have mentioned before. So the classification is mainly used for clinical diagnosis, but of course it is also used for research and also for professional development, probably by trainees. And the end users, around 30% prefer the books, another 30% prefer the website, another 30% prefer both the books and the website. So for the 6th series, at least both books and the website will continue, and we will continue to produce blue books. So with all this information, now we are planning for the 6th edition of the WHO classification of tumors. So for this, we had an international tumor classification conference in Lyon, France in May this year, and it was headed by Dr. Ian Cree, who was the head for the 5th edition WHO books. And these are some of the comments and ideas that were discussed, and some decisions were made regarding the future 6th edition books, which I am going to present to you now. So the standing editorial board appointed by the IARC will continue. So the members for this are nominated by professional organizations, but the choice is made by IARC based on the expertise, geographic area that they come from, and the gender, to have a wholesome mixture within the standing members committee. And both the CGC and the Association of Molecular Pathologists will be represented in the standing members committee for the 6th edition. In addition, expert members for the volumes will be nominated by international compliance specialist organizations, assisted by a software tool developed in-house known as BBEST, standing for Blue Book Editor Selection Tool, to ensure fair coverage of authors and editors based on their bibliographic strength. So this was how it was done for the 5th edition, and that will continue. Something new that we have envisaged for the 6th edition is to have a subcommittee structure to tackle families of tumors across different body sites with input from IC3R. This is something new, and we are hoping to have subcommittees for tumors like lymphomas, melanomas, and also we are planning to have one for molecular genetics as well, which will be represented by geneticists and molecular pathologists and others from associated relevant fields. We have close links with several professional organizations like CAP, RCPAT, ICCR, and Staging Systems, UIC, TNM, etc., and CGC, AMP as well, and those associations will be strengthened. So what are the key points? The classification for the 6th edition, the existing classifications will be tweaked wherever it is necessary based on new research evidence. However, the text that is already there will move to a revision mode rather than a rewrite mode, but it will be rewritten when it's necessary if new evidence, research evidence out there suggests that rewriting is necessary. We want to improve the evidence that is quoted. As we know, the levels of evidence for pathology is not the same as for clinical disciplines, and we are in the process of developing a hierarchical levels of evidence pertaining to pathology at IARC. It is a project known as a level of evidence development project. And we also want to harmonize entities covered in several volumes, and the aim is to have a single entry, and the subcommittee structure that we have put in place hopefully will help us to harmonize these entities. And we want to incorporate more whole slide images. We want to review and change the images wherever it is necessary, and we want to define the categories and the families for a tumor based on a hierarchical level wherever it is not very clearly done. So about the website, our website now allows not only individual subscriptions, but it also allows institutional subscriptions for its members. And we want to gather a lot of web users into to have greater interactions with us. We want to develop a web community, and we are exploring the possibilities of uploading videos to our website and also to develop artificial intelligence tools to aid diagnosis. Now, though we are going to continue with printing books, the printing costs have gone up significantly. So we are planning to have only the reference list on the website and to include the PubMed index identities within the text. The cost of the book, of course, the price will go up because of the costs incurred in printing. So now, how are we planning to balance histology versus molecular genetic classifications? We will continue to have very close collaborations with international molecular pathology and genetic groups, and wherever there's clinically relevant evidence available out there that molecular classifications are necessary, we will encourage molecular classifications, whilst balancing the lower middle income settings where these facilities are not available. So whatever molecular genetic information that do not make it to the classification framework will be mentioned under pathogenesis, molecular diagnosis, diagnostics, prognosis, and prediction wherever it is relevant, as I mentioned before, under the multidimensional viewpoint. So we have this memorandum of understanding between the CGC and IARC, and we maintain close collaborations. We have quarterly meetings. Already we have put up CGC and CCGA links on our WCT website. We are going to add CGC, CCGA page links directly to the online version of WCT books, and we are hoping to incorporate QR codes to CGC and CCGA home pages into the printed WCT books. And we want to have close discussions on how to be consistent and up to date as time goes on. So that is to show our website where both the CCG and the CCGA links have been set up. So lastly, this is the building where the WHO classification of tumors is compiled. It's a new building in Lyon, France. And before I conclude, I like to acknowledge Dr. Ian Creed, who was the head of WHO classification of 5th series, for sharing his slides and content. So in summary, I presented the status of the 5th edition of WHO classification of tumors. and presented very briefly what our plans are for the 6th edition. Thank you for listening, and I wish all of you a great day.
So Dr. Dilani will be joining us for a Q&A session live at the end of the session. Before that, I would like to invite Dr. Jennelle Hodge, who is the Director of Cytogenetics, Molecular Genetics, and Pharmacogenomics Labs, and a professor in the Department of Molecular Genetics at Indiana University. So Dr. Hodge is currently a standing editor for the WHO classification of tumors, and she's also the editor-in-chief for the CCGA.
There you go. Thank you. Well, good morning. I wanted to really thank Dr. Lokuhetty for a really great talk and for the opportunity to collaborate as an organization. So I'm going to spend a few minutes updating you about what's going on with the CCGA. The CCGA is the Compendium of Cancer Genome Aberrations, and it's a program of the CGC. It's a collaborative effort to describe chromosome and gene level abnormalities in cancer in a clinical context, what's clinically relevant, because the idea is to use this for our clinical reporting. It's publicly available. It's a free online resource. You can find it at ccga.io. And the idea is to act as a centralized hub of information. So you have a case and you go to this site and you have some pertinent information there, as well as linking out to any other important resources out there like Civic, et cetera, to get the information that you need. It's also has some data visualizations, and importantly, the idea is to have genetic evidence present related to the diseases that we find in the WHO classification tumor books, the blue books, as you heard mentioned. And it's also a wiki-based site, so that means you can update in real time to try to keep up with the rapidity of the literature being produced. In a nutshell, the blue books by the WHO are produced every 3 to 5 years, right? And the problem is genetics moves faster, so this can act as a companion resource to have real-time updating based on the wiki nature of the site for the genetic content with the diseases. So you can, let's say you want to do CML, you can go to the CML page, you can see the genetics, you can do a PubMed search at that moment. Oh, there's a brand new paper that's pertinent. You can add that in a minute right on the site, and then it's available for you and everyone else. So that's how the site's supposed to work, with clinically important information, and we all know what we need to know for reports. There's a number of ways to navigate, but I'm just going to point out the image of the blue book on the side, where you can click on that and actually get the classification tree from that book and find your entity that way. There's a number of different pieces of content, but we're really focused on the genetics. So gene fusions, individual regions of copy number gain and loss, characteristic chromosomal patterns such as hyperdiploid, hypodiploid, et cetera. Gene mutations, the really pertinent ones. I want to emphasize that there are actually a lot of great websites, like I mentioned Civic, but there's many others that have good small mutation information. So we just link to those as well, and clinical significance. We have permission to include all of the recurrent loci tables from the working groups from the CGC, and we have other data visualizations as you can see there. A lot of what's been happening over this last year is we've been further defining the programmatic vision in anticipation of starting to apply for grants. We've been working with an experienced nonprofit program specialist, and we've defined a 5-year program vision. We've created new roles and non-volunteer effort requirements, developed a budget, wrote an explanatory narrative so that people who could potentially fund us would understand what we were trying to do. And we're investigating those nonprofit grant opportunities, in particular targeting initially smaller foundational grants with anticipation of them going for larger NIH in the future. This is the current state of leadership. I'm just going to briefly say that, we have some new roles under editor-in-chief. We now have a technical and a content deputy editor role for leading larger specific efforts, in addition to still our associate editors that are overseeing diseases, specialties like AML, ALL, et cetera, and a technical editor that all work with authors. We have a CCGA work group that includes this leadership, as well as providing additional individuals that can work on other aspects of the project. So right now in the purple is our only currently paid individual, so we have an IT support, but I'm going to show you our plan changes that. We also have a communications liaison that manages our online presence. So here's our 5-year plan. I'm not going to go into any details, but I just want to say that you can see that we have quite a big plan for expansion, including additional paid opportunities. Just need one more minute. Okay, so you heard about this from Dr. Lokuhetty, basically that CGC and IARC are collaborating, and that we will be actually also reaching out to contributors to the books to help contribute to CCGA. The interlinking is indeed happening. You can go to their site and find a link to CCGA under the useful links content. We also have linked to both the online version of the books and their website, IARC. The QR codes are planned to be put in the printed version of their books for CCGA. And we're going to be linking the disease pages by, in the online book diseases, placing a link to the related book tree structure on our site so that people can go and then find the link to the individual page of the disease they want on the CCGA site. Very briefly, I'm just going to say we have many other efforts going on. We're creating additional content. We are streamlining, automating processes. We're standardizing editorial processes. We're exploring collaborations with other organizations like Civic. Please visit our booth in the back by the end of the day if you can and volunteer, because you can actually get a chromosome, potentially a little glass chromosome, for a drawing tonight. I want to thank everyone. It really does take a village to get this done. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennelle. Do we have Dr. Dilani online, the virtual?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, awesome. So we are ready for Q&A. Dr. Garcia-Manero? Can you turn the microphone on, the Q&A?
Thank you. So this was a great opportunity to listen to both of you, Dr. Lokuhetty, Dr. Hodge. So I have a question that I don't know if I'm going to be able to articulate well, and it's not a criticism. But at least in the myeloid field, we've seen a push from the word that Dr. Lokuhetty used called taxonomy, that is basically kind of a morphological description of disease, towards making it more pragmatic in the sense of you have whatever prognosis, or you have particular mutation that is targeted with particular drug. And we see an effort to now call diseases not based on taxonomy, but on practicality. And I think some of us agree with this, some of us, like me, don't really agree with this actually, because particular mutation or therapy may not work the same in a specific context. So what is your view, maybe at WHO or in your organization, about this push to make these kind of molecular notations that are pragmatic overcome actually what is true taxonomy and actually definition of disease in a tissue?
Actually, we are trying to strike a balance because, as you know, the WHO classification is globally used. I showed you some of the results of our survey. So the books are used not only, in those in the developed world, but in diagnosticians and clinicians in the lower middle income settings as well. And in most of those settings, as you mentioned in your speech, molecular genetic facilities are not freely available. So we really need to strike a balance. Of course, we have to take into consideration the clinically important, prognostically important, therapeutically relevant molecular genetic information, and we will certainly do that. At the same time, we need to balance some of these lower middle income settings, which, where they only base their diagnosis on morphology. So we have to be relevant to the whole world, So we have to be really careful. But of course, we will not neglect molecular genetics. That much I can tell you in the 6th edition.
The thing I can add to that is one of the efforts that was started in the 5th edition was chapters that are, like AML with additional abnormalities, that are a listing of provisional genetics-based diseases that may bump up then to their individual category in the future. But it's, instead of having individual chapters of potential provisional, like you said, it's accelerating. So that idea was to try to condense it into a chapter of provisional entities. So there was one for AML, ALL, that kind of thing.
If you allow me to,
process. Yeah.
If you allow me to make a comment, actually, I think we should follow the WHO and your effort. I'm more concerned about this kind of like splint groups that all of a sudden come with parallel fast classification. For instance, in the myeloma subset, this ICC classification with this idea of making easier access to clinical trials or cold diseases, because I think modestly, and this is just my single opinion, this creates a lot of confusion. It may create a lot of confusion with regulatory agencies. Now we call diseases with two different names, and I think what you're saying makes a lot of sense. It's the way we should support this, like a global, world confirmed classification of these disorders based on what traditionally the WHO has been, more than these more pragmatic kind of parallel subgroups that are creating a lot of confusion in our field in myeloid malignancies.
Yeah, I know, because, my predecessor, Dr. Ian Cree, I know he reached out to most of these, branches that tried to do different classifications and were trying to, come to some negotiated settlement. Only thing, I'm not very privy to all the information because, I took up this post only quite recently. Maybe Jennelle, probably, I am sure you were involved in the hematolymphoid book. Could you add on to this, please?
Well, I can definitely say that there was a lot of efforts to have discussions amongst groups, and that beyond the heme one, there's always other classification suggestions coming out from organizations. I think it is ideal to have a single globally accepted classification, like you said, for confusion. If you actually, though, break down specifically the heme, the differences are extremely minor, and they're more in the gray zone of evidence pieces. So the hope then, of course, is that these things will merge together in the future as more evidence actually gives us, the answer to what those gray zones should be.
Dr. Sachin?
So this is Dr. Sachin Jadhav. I'm from India. We do quite a bit of work with our collaborators in Southeast Asia and Africa. From what you showed, Dr. Lokuhetty, the adoption of the book is less. It's just about 1% or so in Africa, and could be much more in Asia. Do you think there could be some kind of a subsidized access that could be looked at if we are going to improve treatment of malignancies in the low middle income countries? Starting with adoption of standardized classification would be an important step.
Actually, it is already there. Lower middle income settings get discounts for both the printed books as well as the website. So it's already there. And it's a significant discount, yeah.
So then, to drive adoption, do you think there should be educational or awareness activities?
I suppose so. Yes, I suppose
Thank
so.
you.
Yeah. And the other thing is, this survey was mostly circulated among the expert editors and the authors. I don't know how far it reached the end users. That I'm not too sure. So that also could have impacted the results.
Thank you.
Thank you. I don't see that there are any more questions, no virtual questions either. So I would like to sincerely thank Dr. Dilani for joining at this odd hour for you probably. We really appreciate it. And thank you so much, Jennelle, for the presentation.